So I bought a condo here in Honolulu and I thought my life was all set, right? I'd never have to do the long commutes again, lots to do here in downtown, live, work, and play, right? However, ever since getting married and having a couple of kids, my living situation has changed. And I'm realizing that in terms of housing, there's not really a clear path from where we are here in town to where we want to be. And in a lot of ways, if you get a condo like that one, or maybe that one, or maybe a couple of these ones back here, it can kind of feel like a trap. And let me explain. But first, let me just say that I am really grateful and thankful to have been able to buy a place. I know that a lot of people are trying, it's very expensive, and frankly, it really came down to timing, luck, and some family help. But as our boys get older, we're gonna have to make some tough choices on where we're gonna live and really how we move from here to somewhere bigger, somewhere where our family can continue to grow. So let me just give you an example. Let's say someone can buy a affordable unit here in town, like maybe like that building right there, you know, for locals. You know, they move into the unit, all things are great, a lot of pictures, new furniture, everything is shiny, association fees are low, life seems to be going great. And if you work in downtown, it's a lifestyle change. You never have to drive those long commutes again. And for a while, it's absolutely great. But then as the years go on, life happens and things tend to change. First, just from a building standpoint, buildings starting to get a little bit older. Maybe those elevators that were running seamlessly are now starting to break down. Pipes need to be replaced, and as a result, association fees start to climb up. Meanwhile, your life starts to change. Maybe you have a kid, or like us too, and you need more space. Maybe you don't like being in town. I know that sounds crazy for people who have to drive, but sometimes you just gotta get out where you don't just see buildings all the time, and maybe you feel that need to be out more in the country. So now it's time to move, right? But how? Now, assuming you got one of the affordable units in at least this particular area, you're gonna be under certain rules in terms of being able to sell it and what kind of equity you're gonna get. With HHFDC, there's a shared equity program, usually with a 10-ish year limit, which means that you're gonna have to live there for at least 10 years or you will be giving a lot of appreciation back to them, leaving you with not much equity to go and buy someplace else. And with housing being so tight, you know what? That's fair. Everyone knew the rules before signing all the papers. It's just that life sometimes happens, and if life's gonna happen and you get something unexpected or maybe even planned, you're not gonna have as much money to be able to move out of town as maybe you thought. And even if there aren't any selling restrictions or shared appreciation rules, where are you gonna look to buy? Well, ideally you'd wanna move out of town and go buy a house. But buying a house in town is really expensive and very challenging, so that's probably off the table. And so just realistically, most of the houses that you'll be looking at are gonna be out on the west side, which means more space, but at the same time, it also means now you got that commute. And having lived in downtown for 2 to 3 to 5 years, are you willing now to change your lifestyle, to do the 2 to 3 hours of commute every single day to come back into work? Whereas before, maybe you could walk to work or bike, or at the very most, 10-minute drive. And there's a lot of lifestyle changes as well. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but the people living here in town, they're kind of different from the people in other parts of the island, particularly those up on the west side. And I should also mention on the windward side as well. And so you have to ask yourself, are you gonna be able to assimilate into that culture, into that west side or whatever neighborhood culture? Because it's not gonna be the same as living up here in downtown. And sure, it's a little rougher, but some might say there's a charm to the fireworks and the loud mopeds and a lot of dogs. And so some people choose to make that trade. They trade downtown for a house on the west side. And for them, that's worth it. But if you're not willing to make that trade, well, then you're kind of stuck looking at a condo or a townhouse, maybe again here in town. But you know what, maybe you'll find a nice condo or townhome, maybe in town or reasonably close to town. But then you're starting to look at older buildings, and with those aged buildings, you're talking about, again, high maintenance fees. As the cars all whiz by with the big buses coming, I remember when we started looking for condos and we looked in the Salt Lake area, some of those condos, they're kind of old looking. And as we walked in there and we checked out the place, it almost seemed like a downgrade because of how old some of these buildings were. And so we really had to ask ourselves, are we willing to settle for what seems like a downgrade just for the extra square footage? And I'm starting to think that it really comes down to compromise, because if you were able to buy one of these, well, you can't see it here, but maybe you can you see it in there? But if you're able to buy one of the newer condos, there's nowhere else that they're building this much new housing except another new condo. I mean, frankly, I was hoping that they would start building condos around the rail stations now, not when the rail stations are functional and everyone's all excited and starting to use them, but now when the rail station is not really being used and ridership is low. Build them out right now so that when the rail station is open, people will be right there and the prices of those units will still be relatively cheap. But alas, I don't think that's gonna happen. In fact, I think they're gonna start way later, and I'm really hoping that we don't see what happened here with some of these buildings. I really hope we don't see that happening around some of those west side stations. Now, frankly, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when I first bought the condo here in downtown, I never thought about stuff like this. Maybe it seems so obvious to some people, but at the time, I was just excited to have a place. Everyone kept telling me, oh, you're so lucky. You're gonna save so much money, you don't have to pay rent, and you're gonna be building equity, and then you'll be able to sell it, and then you're gonna be able to buy a new house. And sure, that would have all worked out if the housing market was more stable and there was a fresh inventory and more units being built all the time. But as with a lot of things in Hawaii, that's not how it played out. And to think that some young professional is going to be able to afford, let's say, our unit is just kind of unrealistic. I mean, maybe they could have gotten it on the initial price like we did. But once the system is set up where you have to sell your unit to max out on the profits to then buy another unit, to buy a big boy house or big girl house, it's never gonna be affordable again. Unless, of course, you got plenty cash or you buy it from a relative. And so instead, I wish there was a clear pipeline where people who are buying affordable units, they can kind of move up that affordable unit chain without having to change lanes and get out. So, for example, I wish that we could sell our place for very close to what we bought it for all those years ago and sell it to someone who's gonna live in it, who is just starting a family, or maybe they're just single and this is all that they can afford, but they really wanna move into town. But the thing is, that only works if then we're able to move into a little bigger place, a 2 or 3 bedroom place for ourselves at a price that is comparable to what we paid for initially. But until we have a system that addresses that, Hawaii is gonna continue to lose affordable units. I mean, it's just like the game of Monopoly. You can only go so many times around the board before everything is bought up, and then you just end up paying rent. And more specifically in Hawaii, people either hold on so tightly to their units that they're never gonna sell them, or they just decide to sell it to the highest bidder and go move to the mainland. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this condo trap. And hopefully none of the people that are gonna move in here ever feel that way. Thanks for watching, and Aloha.